my name is Kat, and today I am continuing the Factors of a Great Novel series with world building. Creating a world is quite the task. There are many things to consider, whether you are building a fantasy world from scratch or writing a contemporary novel already set in a real location. And there are two parts to world building when it comes to writing a novel. The first part is the information gathering, the research, the part where you gather all the knowledge of your world. And the second part is the incorporating all of this knowledge into your story. And you do want to keep in mind that while not everything you develop and create and write down when you're doing the world building will make it into the story, but it's still important for you, the author, to have this information. Because the more you know, the easier it will be to find places in the novel that you can sprinkle in little bits of world. Let's start in big terms. We're talking planet-wide, worldwide stuff here. Things like weather, climate, geography. If you are writing a contemporary novel or a fantasy novel set in the real world, you can choose a real actual location, and it changes your focus from world invention to world research. If you don't want to set your story in a specific existing place, or if you need to invent something from scratch because you're writing some odd fantasy world, I do recommend choosing one real location or maybe several real locations, just because it will give you a really good starting place for things like weather and geography and climate. You may also want to think of laws and rules and politics and natural resources and other worldwide events. You might also want to work out a little bit of history for your world. History makes a location feel richer. Give your world a backstory. After you have all the big worldly type things out of the way, you can move down to a local level. Instead of things that affect the whole world, think of things that affect the specific location in which your story takes place. The city, the town, the village, the valley, the mountain, the desert. Geography. Brainstorm the kind of things that change from state to state or country to country. Food, clothing styles, language, social customs, dating and relationships and family, shopping, arts, entertainment, education. So many things! All of the things! And if you're at a total loss and can't really think of anything, start by thinking of what makes the city that you live in different from the other cities in your state or country. So many details on a local level that can really enrich your story, because there's just so many more opportunities for your character to interact with those things on a daily basis. Which brings us to the most detailed level, the daily routine of your main characters. Think of all the ways your character interacts with the world around them on a daily basis. And I think the best way to do this is to write down, as specific and as detailed as you can make it, your character's typical daily routine. Your character wakes up in the morning. When do they wake up? What do they wake up to? The beep 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 of the alarm, or their favorite CD kicking into gear, or local news radio? What time do they wake up? Why do they wake up at that time? Do they eat breakfast at home? Do they eat breakfast on their way out the door? Do they not eat breakfast? They go to school or work or whatever. How do they get there? Walking, car, bus, school bus, city bus? It's probably not fascinating stuff, but getting down your character's typical average day will help you figure out when and where they interact with the world, and those are the places that you can really add world building details. I think the key to world building is a combination of creativity and research. Research, research, research. Sometimes you have to look at it almost like an assignment, or at least that's what I do, because assigning myself something with a due date just really helps me to get it done. Of course, I procrastinate, but I get it done eventually. So one assignment that I'm giving myself this week is to write a report about my world. Now, when I was like in junior high or so, everyone in the class was assigned a state to write a report on. We had to include the state bird, the state motto, the state flag, the climate and weather of the state, all of that stuff. So I'm gonna do a report like that on my world. This is pretty much just a big info dump of world building, a Wikipedia page for your world. And again, not all of this will make it into the story, but having it down is so useful to you. It helps you pick out what information is useful, which tiny details will enrich the story and paint a bigger picture. What info is the most interesting, which details enrich the world and the story the most. Since I am writing a fantasy novel set in a different world, I'm also going to make some maps. You gotta love maps. And since my characters visit a couple different towns on their journey, I'm going to make sure to give each of these towns differences. So they each have their own kind of flavor and atmosphere about them that is different down the line. And I have shared this link before, but I'm going to share it again because it is just so brilliant. I will leave it in the description. It is a fantastic world building resource. Use this as a starting reference for creating your world. I'm also going to write out in as much detail as possible a daily routine for each of my main characters. One for Sarah, one for Asher, one for Callista. Those are my main characters. This is not something that will ever make it into the story or ever be a part of the story, but it will help me learn not only more about the characters, but also about how they interact with the world around them. And finally, I'm going to start work on a timeline. Now, I will talk more about this next week, because for right now, all I really want to know is how much time passes over the course of my novel. Is it a quick 2-day thing, or does your novel span a year at boarding school? Figure out how much time you are working with. For me, with Storyteller, the book takes place over about a month, so I want to spend some time thinking and brainstorming about what worldly changes and events can take place during that month. You know, what kind of weather changes, any big celebrations or holidays like a fall harvest, what plants and foods are in season, are people wearing warm weather clothes or cold weather clothes? And finally, we get to the second part of world building, incorporating all of this information into the actual story. Unfortunately, there is no trick or formula or secret tip for how to include all of this world info. It's just something that you have to get a feel for. Whenever your character interacts with the world around them, that's a chance to include world building information. And once you have all of this information down that you can look at and reference and that you know, it becomes a lot easier to include it into the story organically. You want to sprinkle in that world building info gradually, just a little bit at a time, and avoid a giant page of info dump. Find the places in your story that will be enriched by world building, not bogged down by it. When someone is eating food, be specific about that food. Let a character's speech and style reflect not just their personality, but the world and time that they live in. Weather. Weather is a great one to add because it can enrich a scene in so many ways. It can be antagonistic, it can be beautiful, it can play directly or indirectly into the story. Once you have the information, it's so much easier to pick and choose what is important to include and also where you can include it. Alright, that is everything I wanted to share with you today. I will include that world building link in the description because it's just so brilliant, and I will have the next installment of Factors of Great Novels Story Edition out in about a week. Next Wednesday, probably Thursday actually, if I'm going to be real with you. But in the meantime, I will have a new vlog up in a couple of days, so I will see you then. Goodbye!